What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Healthcare Hustle Podcast. Today, we are joined by Hilary Harris, Executive Director of Patient Care Operations at Barnes-Jewish Hospital in St. Louis, Missouri. Hilary, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us, Hilary. Really excited to have you on. If you could just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey up until this point, and just kind of share with us just a little bit more about you.
Sure, thank you. So I have had the pleasure of being with Barnes-Jewish Hospital here in St. Louis for the last 23 years. I'm at a transition point in my career in that I currently serve as the Executive Director for Patient Care Operations, but at the end of March, I will be transitioning to a new role within one of our sister hospitals within BJC Healthcare as the Vice President and Chief Operating Officer for Christian Hospital. So lots of change happening right now in my world, but very exciting. I am a physical therapist by training and actually started my career at Barnes-Jewish Hospital as a physical therapy student, and then was fortunate to be able to be hired during a time when there were no physical therapy jobs. The Balanced Budget Act of 1999 or 98, whichever one it was, had just happened. And I started physical therapy school, and there were lots of jobs, sign-on bonuses. And by the time I finished physical therapy school, there were none. And so I was hired about a month after I finished my clinical, and started working here 2 weekends a month, and was grateful to have some sort of employment, and then was full-time within about a month of that point in time. And really have been able to grow my career here at Barnes-Jewish Hospital in ways that I never anticipated. As a staff therapist, I work primarily in our cardiothoracic ICU, doing early mobility before early mobility was really the in thing. But our cardiothoracic ICU had physical therapists in the ICU for probably 5 to 10 years prior to my start, and was really a pioneer in that space. And so I loved being at the bedside. It was where I excelled. And like many clinicians who are excellent at what they do, they oftentimes get tapped on the shoulder for leadership. And first it was informal leadership, and then it was there was an opportunity for a lead therapist that came available, and I took the opportunity and was able to really start growing my career. And then it started to really get bitten by the leadership bug, so to speak. I enjoyed developing team members. I did a lot of our new employee orientation and training of new therapists across physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech pathology, and was really began to find myself. Never really thought of myself of completely leaving the bedside, but was really enjoying the opportunity to spend time on team development and leadership, and then moved into supervisor role, eventually to the manager of the rehab department. And it was when I was the manager of the department that I discovered hospital operations, as I was being pulled into various hospital projects, and really began to say, okay, this is where I like to live. This is fun for me. It's what I enjoy. I love solving the complex problems of hospital operations, and I'm biased, and I think that my training as a physical therapist sets me up to do it very well, and helps me to do the work in different ways compared to other individuals. And so I have been fortunate to then move in to be a director of FIRST therapy services, so including respiratory care and pulmonary rehab. And then for the last 2 years, I've served in the role of executive director for patient care operations. My primary area of responsibility is capacity management, and ensuring that we are keeping the wheels, if you will, of Barnes-Jewish Hospital moving. but then also have responsibility for a lot of the ancillary teams that support patient care services, so case management and social work, our nursing office, our patient support services, our therapy teams, and then also have responsibility for vulnerable populations. So a lot of my work is also around improving care and access for our sickle cell population in St. Louis.
So a bit of everything across the organization. There's so much to ask you about. So the first question, as a follow-up to your response, and thank you so much for giving a thorough answer. Why physical therapy? Why was that the initial kind of, entrance for you? And then, you said that kind of helped you see operations in a different light. Can you kind of go into, what improved your lens regarding operations after serving in a PT role?
Well, if I was honest, I was pre-med when I started college. And I wanted to be a doctor. I was always interested in science as a kid, and had an interest in the study of genetics. Actually, it was from having a friend in high school that was in middle school that had sickle cell. And so it was really about learning about how do you provide care and how do you make things better. But my sister also, who was premature as a baby, also received physical therapy, and we would oftentimes do the exercises and stuff like that with her. And in college, I encountered organic chemistry, and I do not have the brain of an organic chemist. And so therefore, I decided that maybe I should think about what can I do so that I don't have to take organic chemistry ever again in life. And so my advisor in college was phenomenal and said, have you thought about physical therapy? She had a colleague who had her own physical therapy business and was really able to, was a graduate of Washington University in St. Louis, and was really able to show me that Black women could be physical therapists. She was a Black woman who had other Black women who were physical therapists that worked for her. And so that really opened my eyes to something I had never considered. And the more I started to investigate it, I decided that that was where I wanted to grow. It allowed me to connect with patients in a way that doctors, don't necessarily get. It allowed me not to have, the overnights and some of the other things that I wasn't sure I really wanted as a doctor. And so that was where I kind of found my niche into physical therapy. And so to your question about why do I think physical therapy has trained me to think differently? Well, in physical therapy, it's really the study of motion and improving motion. And so that can be the small motion that you see at, how the knee works and, the way that the patella tracks, or the big motion of walking. And there's a lot that when you look at it, you have to look holistically and say, okay, where is the problem? And then is that problem something that I can correct? Or do I have to create a different strategy for how that motion can be done? And you do short-term you set short-term goals, you set long-term goals, and you develop an intervention plan to help you to achieve those. And when you think about solving complex hospital problems or other issues, it is really a matter of saying, okay, what is the problem that we're trying to solve? Do we need to correct? Do we need to come up with a new strategy? Do we need to adjust? And then you have to have an intervention plan with short-term and long-term goals to help you get there. And so I think the way I think as a result of my training really helps me to do that well without having to, really adjust anything.
Wow. I mean, I really love the fact that you were able to kind of translate the skill set or the thought process of the physical therapy over to the administrative world and the leadership world. And I think that's a perfect segue into the next question for me. It sounds like for you, patient care was very rewarding. You were able to connect with the patient, and your solid work kind of spoke for itself, and that the leadership opportunities were brought to you. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that transition from the patient care to the administrative leadership world, and how that transition was for you?
So the transition was fairly natural for me, in the sense that I began to see how my influence really was much broader. So when I was at the bedside, I would see, 12 patients at most in one day. And I would touch those 12 patients, and then the next day it would be a new 12 patients, and that sort of thing. Whereas when I was, when I began in leadership in the rehab department, we had therapists that were touching every patient, or about half of the patients in the hospital. And so suddenly the work I was doing was increasing the number of patients that I could indirectly touch. And so if I could make the work better for the therapists, then that made their job easier to provide care. Or in the situation of my current role, where I'm really looking at how do we improve throughput, how do we keep the doors open and create access for patients that are either in the emergency department or needing to come from another outside hospital. Really, I'm looking at, the 1,100 patients we have in the hospital, and the 30 patients that are wanting to come into the organization from an outside hospital. How can I create capacity for them and touch an even broader patient population? And so for me, it was a natural transition. I started to see kind of my delivery of care and my care of team members, but also delivery of care, in that I was caring for a much broader population of patients, indirectly through the work I was doing.
That's a brilliant answer, and I really have to double down on Brandon's comment. I think the mobility metaphor between a patient and then a health system or hospital is brilliant, because as an institutional organization, hospitals have to move, right? They have to be flexible. We can't be rigid. And so just that obviously speaks to your genius. I'm going to be honest. It speaks to just how you think already. But for us, and I'm thinking about the Hilary in 2023, who's at the bedside right now, and I'm just curious for you, did you always have aspirations to be a leader? What was, when you first started out, and even as you started to develop and become a hot shot within the department, where was your mind at in terms of, okay, I could be this or I could be that? What was that, the height of your career back then?
When I started as a bedside therapist, that was my career. I oftentimes joke with people that a hospital executive is my second career, and that I never thought that that's what I would do. And I think part of it was I didn't know what was possible, because I hadn't seen it. And so I think that that's why having people in positions of leadership that look like you, that are in roles that you were in, is so critical for the new people coming into the workforce today, so that they can see what's possible. And so I didn't conceptually know that you could be a therapist and also a chief operating officer. That wasn't in my mindset when I started 23 years ago. And so, but I was fortunate to have leaders that really pushed and challenged me once I moved into leadership, and was fortunate to be able to have strong mentors who started to say, so what are your goals? What do you want to do? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Which was a really hard question for me, because I don't like to have things planned out on a year. I just don't, my brain doesn't work that way for me, in the sense of saying in 5 years I'm going to be this role, right? Like that seems really presumptuous in my mind, that I there's so many different factors, but they really began to help me focus on, okay, so if you don't want to say a specific role, what do you want to develop? What are those skills and things like that you want to focus on, or what are the areas of leadership practice that you want to continue to grow in? And so, I think that having leaders who really supported my development, who allowed me to attend training courses or various leadership development programs that really help broaden my mind, I think that has been a pivotal impact in my career, to say, this is what's possible, and don't sell yourself short, Hilary. You can do more, you can achieve more than you thought when you first started out.
Wow, so thank you yeah, for that. I think that's beautiful. And I actually love the thought process of, not necessarily thinking about the destination or the position 3 to 5 years out, but just more so how you want to develop. I was like, man, if I did that, with something, come out different than what I think currently have projected. I think I definitely want to kind of just get a better sense of what your experience was like as a young, clinician, young leader, a woman as well, a Black woman in these spaces. We know that, everyone has different experiences, but, you mentioned having some key figures early on that were instrumental. How were you navigating these spaces all throughout your time? And was there any time where you felt like, oh, my identity is kind of either being put on Front Street or not being put on Front Street, as you kind of elevated up the ladder?
That's a good question. I think that from probably high school, I was somewhat outspoken when it came to just whatever. I was talking with someone recently and said, when I was in high school, I was in high school during the end of apartheid, and went to a predominantly white high school where there was like 3,000 students, and less than I think 3% were Black. And so it was it could be a very isolating community. And there was no diversity club at the time. And so I remember in high school helping start that diversity club. And so for me, being, in some ways a leader was part of who I was. I'm the oldest, and, I bossed my siblings and cousins around a whole lot growing up. But as I moved into different roles here, I remember at the bedside, patients not wanting to have a person of color provide care. And, it was one of those things, well, here I am, I can get you up today, and you can, this will help you discharge. And, I'm happy to leave, but I can't guarantee you that someone's going to come back today. And usually patients would, acquiesce. Some didn't. And, but that was the reality of life that I had always experienced, right? My parents raised us that, as soon as you step out of the door, you're Black, and life is not necessarily fair, and life is not necessary, and it's not right, but you need to be prepared for this. And so for me, it wasn't a surprise, it just was. And I was fortunate to see other Black women in leadership positions at this organization. And so I think that was important to see, and see how they showed up, how they led, that they were involved not only in the leading of their service or their department, but that they were involved in other things within the community or in other ways, whether that was through their kids' schools or other things, but they were very involved. And I think that that has helped me as a Black woman, as a leader, to really kind of remember why I do what I do, and to stay focused on the possible, because I think I've seen women who have been able to do it and then challenge. And the challenge to me is, well, how do we set you up to be able to do this in the future? And I think for myself, that's what I try to then, I take from my mentors and my leaders to say, okay, with my team, how do I help them in the way that I've been helped?
I'm sorry, B. I keep cutting you off. I apologize. I just love that. Stay focused on the possible. That is such a positive, I think, outlook, and also like a really, self-affirming, I think, mindset to have. So I just had to throw that in there. I think that's the episode title. That was fire. So apologize, B. It's all you.
No, I knew it. Honestly, thank you so much, Hilary, for sharing that with us and our audience. Honestly, it's one of those messages that is, just timeless. And I think it's kind of interesting that you, as a Black woman, has been able to excel and perform at such a high level and meet so many challenges throughout your career at BJ. And one of the things I would love to know more about is just, typically, especially nowadays, you hear every 24 to 36 months, be looking around, or just kind of just keep your options open. So as somebody who's been able to do something this well for this long at one organization, how is that as a challenge? How was that as a pro? How was that as a con? And if you just can maybe expound on that a little bit. I hate to leave you with such a vague question, but
No, I think I get it, in the sense that I don't know that I've ever gone looking for a new job, if that makes sense. In the sense that I know what my goals are. And so I have told my goals to my leaders, or if I'm having a skip level conversation with someone, I'll say, long term, I would like to, I've said long term, I could see myself doing a chief operating officer role. And so I began to have those discussions. When I didn't know what a role was, it was, I see myself doing hospital operations, right? And so I would say it and I would talk about it. And then what I found is that they would give me then as opportunities came up, they would come talking. So the first time I said to my boss, I think hospital operations is really where I want to be. Probably a month later, I got a call that said, we have a leadership gap in the emergency department, and we would like you to step in as the interim director. And my first response was to scream no, right? Like, that seems scary. That seems, I'm not a nurse. I know nothing about an emergency room and running an emergency room. And so my first response was thinking, oh my gosh, I don't want to fail, right? And so I don't want to fail. This seems risky. There's been a lot of turnover in that role. Is it the role? Is it the department? What is it? And instead, I kind of trusted and took a leap of faith to say, okay, yes, I'll do it, but I don't want to fail. So how can I get support? And the response was, you will not fail. And we are confident that you can do this. And so for me, that was one of the first tests of my leadership skills, and that it was out of my wheelhouse of expertise. I had been leading our therapy departments. So even though I'm not a respiratory therapist, it was the same still discipline. I'm not an occupational therapist or speech pathologist, but some of the principles are the same. And so that was the first foray outside of an area of expertise, and really allowed me to test what I knew, which was leadership. And that's where I felt like I had the first validation that my leadership skills were transferable outside of my area of expertise.
Wow. So I have to just, for our audience, Barnes-Jewish Hospital, one of the largest hospitals in the country, level 1 trauma center in St. Louis. So when we're talking about the ED, just in terms of complexity, volume, like many other cities, but it is a beast. And Hilary, I believe you actually have served in that role twice. You kind of provided some backup, right? Correct?
So I'm helping. I'm still helping support now again.
So so for me, this is just fascinating because I really feel like outside of meetings, I haven't had a chance to hear you really speak to just the healthcare piece of everything that you do. And so, I've been able to observe other leaders, right, of, particular departments or service lines, and you could kind of tell, like, okay, these are the key KPIs that they're looking for. This is what makes them happy. This is what they feel confident in talking about. I've seen you, I feel like, be a rogue director, executive director for the entire hospital, right? In this interesting title that you have now. So what are some of your, validators? How do you feel good when you leave, the hospital every day? What reinforces that, okay, like I am doing what I need to be doing? And is that something that you take personally, like, hey, like I've done a good job? Or is it more so my teams and the hospital because you've done so much as an individual yourself? I just have to say that.
So I am, that's a great question. Sometimes when you're in the work, right, and you're doing the work, you don't always realize the impact you're having. And so, sometimes it's just the day to day and you're on this hamster wheel and you can't really see the accomplishments. And then usually at some point in time, you'll be in a meeting and people are reviewing data and all of a sudden you'll see it. And so an example that I'll give that was validating for me that the work is the right work is that the work with sickle cell is hard work. It's challenging work. It's really, combating all the isms, right? Poverty, racism, structural discrimination, all of it, and really trying to say, how do we create access for a population of patients who need specialized differentiated care? And so, and you've got providers that are committed to the work. You've got patients who are not having good experience. And so we started in 2018, 2019, a committee really to focus on that work and to partner with our physician partners to make improvements. And we were really focused initially on the readmissions. We had at Barnes-Jewish Hospital, it was the the third highest readmission rate. And it was at like 35%. And we were in a meeting sometime last year, and they said our data analysts showed us the trend year over year and the improvements that we made. And we were down to like 26% readmission rate. And so it was like, it is working, So for me, that was extremely valid. That was the satisfaction that I took out of it, was seeing the metrics improve. Now, of course, then I was like, but we've not communicated that to the community and, things like that, because I'm always looking for the next, the improvement. But that was an area where I felt like as a broad team of the work that we were doing was making an impact because we had seen a measurable improvement in the outcomes. I think other things, it's really looking to see, are we seeing improvement, whether that's through the execution of standard work or process, and then also the relationships. I think for me, the relationships with my peers or providers or my direct reports are the things that to me are foundational to how we to my success as a leader. And that when I see those relationships really thriving and then resulting in process being improved and process being changed and standard work and that sort of thing really being implemented, that's when I feel like you start to see the results. And so for me, I think those three things are how I then get the validation and satisfaction, is that looking to see, do I have each of those things? Because the results sometimes are really hard to get, because it is, with some of, when I think about our capacity management and some of those metrics that we track with throughput and things like that, sometimes it's not a pretty picture, and it's hard to get results because staffing is causing us to be less efficient. And there's so many factors that can cause the scorecard to be all red. But when you see the other things that are, you're doing the right work, you're making improvements in how that standard work is being done, and you see small changes in the outcomes, but you're not getting those big changes yet, they will come. It just is slow sometimes, and you have to be patient.
I love how you linked the relationship with your peers, direct reports, and leaders to improved, adoption of standard work, or just rolling out of that to segue into, improve patient outcomes. I actually think that's really powerful, because what I hear from you is, the culture of the organization is something that you also focus on. And I think, we definitely could sit here and say that you are a direct product example of the evolution of the culture of Barnes-Jewish Hospital. But personally, how have you seen that evolve? How have you seen the organization evolve from just the culture, also the operations? Because it's my understanding that in years past, a couple of decades ago, it's always been a crazy place, but wasn't as crazy as it, has been in the last few years. So just what, has your perspective of that evolution been like?
Oh goodness, it's changed a ton. It's always been a really complex place with lots of things happening. I think that's why those of us that have stayed for as long as we have love it here, is because the complexity. But I think that, like healthcare in general, Barnes-Jewish Hospital and BJC Healthcare have evolved over time. And I think a lot of it is due to the leadership that's in place, and the leaders that are really focused on not only the here and now, right, but making the organization stronger, better, more nimble, and focusing on leader development and that sort of thing. I think all of that has really contributed to a positive culture. Let's see, you said something, what was the second part of your question? I'm sorry. Oh, how I've seen
the operation, like the actual healthcare, the operations, and just doing that as well.
Yeah, the operations probably have become more complex in the sense that, and I think a lot of it is, even when you think about pre-COVID and now in this kind of post-COVID era, there are so many different things that can disrupt the flow of the day. And pre-COVID, we were focused on our throughput and wanted to see things improving. We were focused on safety and quality metrics, and we're working on all sorts of initiatives. But then with COVID, then you had, this big, illness and infection that touched every aspect of everyone's lives. Now we have supply disruptions that come into play. There's staffing challenges that touch every aspect of the organization. So from our EVS and food nutrition team members to our public safety officers, to the nursing, to the providers, there's not a role in the organization that's not touched with staffing challenges. And so then you, in trying to say, okay, to be able to operate efficiently, here's what we need from a staffing perspective, and you don't have that to begin with. And so then, but you still have to figure out, how do you continue to deliver care? And I think that is one of the biggest challenges that face healthcare going forward is how do we deliver care when the resources are not going to always be available, and how do we do that efficiently and effectively going forward?
I was just gonna say, like, honestly, Hillary, I think you touched on a lot of really, really, really good points in regards to hospital operations. One of the things that kind of resonated to me was what you were saying earlier in regards to the data, kind of validating what it is you have been doing in regards to the complex work in the ERs. And for me, I think, just working in hospital operations, we all look at, as far as the strategic planning, as far as the goals, we always look at the data. But what are some of those things, those intangible things that you think, as far as a hospital leader, as far as hospital operations, that you think is really necessary and has withstood the test of time as things have gotten more and more complex, as things have, you know, um, we start adding in more things to measure and track? What are some of those things that you say, outside of that, we need to make sure that these things are in order?
I think our patients' experience, that has to be at the forefront, because they're why they're, and I think some of our safety issue, metrics and things like that, those are why we're here. That's the whole reason that we're here, is that we are creating a positive environment for our patients. It's a healing environment, it's safe, and that we can achieve positive outcomes. Now, but I think in order to do that, you have to have a strong workforce. And so if you're not looking at how do you take care of your team and your workforce, then you will never achieve some of those other things. And so I think that, and that's really been a focus. That's really been a focus of ours over the last year or two, is that how do we ensure that our leaders and our workforce are well taken care of, that they feel supported, that we stabilize them so that they can in turn take care of the team, and the team can then in turn take care of the patients.
You have given me a new appreciation for the phrase workforce stabilization, because up until this point, I had never considered any leaders were really thinking like that, right? I always was thinking, oh, we just want to make sure our staffing is good, in our areas to get the highest volume that we need people for. Never really thought like, no, like what leaders are really saying is we really want, the workforce to be stable, have stability, like you said, so they can be the champions that they are. We're coming up on time, but there's so many different questions I have for you. And you addressed some things about sickle cell, which we're actually planning to have an episode, dedicated fully to that. So be on the lookout for that. And I think that one of the things that you mentioned is, and in that example that I don't want, people to get lost is, you were really just a champion, a senior or executive sponsor. From my eyes, I have a little bit more insight being on some of those meetings that really were just, holding people accountable, I feel like, to the care provision of those patients. And just that alone led to improved outcomes. So I think that just says a lot. It says a lot about what you can do when you have, the seat at the table, so to speak, and you don't necessarily have to be some revolutionary, but literally just doing your job and focusing on that. So for some context for our listeners, at the beginning, Hilary mentioned that she's getting ready to make a pretty big transition. And Barnes-Jewish Hospital, BJH, that's the flagship hospital of our healthcare system, kind of the big fancy, thing, a part of the academic medical center, where we see a lot of complex, cases, a lot of patients from all over the world, the region, but also directly from the city of St. Louis, and where Hilary is getting ready to transition, for better or for worse, is kind of known as the premier hospital for our Black population within St. Louis, North City and North County. So Hilary, for you, we talked about it a little bit, before we got on, but some people may look at this transition and be like, wow, okay, higher title, more interesting, but not at the big fancy place with the huge equipment and the gigantic care teams that can do all of that, and may have some more challenges, distinct challenges as a community hospital, excuse me. So how are you, processing that? What are the things that you're looking for and towards? And what would you say to someone who may have that comment, like, oh, wow, you're leaving the academic medical center to go to the community? What's going on with that?
So this was a question I actually got during the interview process. And for me, the answer was why not, right? Why not go to Christian Hospital? The mission of Christian Hospital is very similar to the mission of Barnes Jewish Hospital, to provide care to the local community, to meet a need for the underserved, and really deliver care at a high that is high quality. And from that stance, it's a natural transition for me. I have been committed to that mission over the last 23 years. It's why I've stayed, and I feel like that North County community deserves high quality healthcare in their own neighborhood. Why should I have to travel to get healthcare? When I can get it in my own neighborhood. And so for me, it's really not a stretch to say, why would I want to do this? It allows me to continue to grow my career, to do so within the health system that I've been a part of for the last 23 years. And really, as BJC begins this journey of being an integrated academic healthcare system, I think it's an exciting time to say, what will that look like in the future, and what role will Christian Hospital play in that, and how will that benefit the patients in that region? So.
Wow, that's a very succinct, excellent answer. We can see why you're going to be the new CEO of Christian, of course. And this is just, I think it's so awesome for our community, for our team, for our employees, for our patients, for everyone. So just thank you for continuing to be the leader that you are, the light that you are, the guide, mentor, advisor, sponsor for all of us, because it's a huge deal. So we are approaching time. I heard that Outlook notification, so I know you're going to have other meetings to attend to. So just in our last few minutes, one of the things, if Nigel was here, we have some rapid fire questions for you, but he's our local guy for that, so we won't do that. But we'll ask you, what is one piece, or, however many pieces of advice that you would give to, folks like me, Brandon, other folks that are coming in our footsteps and just looking, to be the Hilary Harris one day? What is one piece of advice you'd share?
Oh, that's a tough one. But, I would say be patient, and be open. Be open to things that you don't know why that you're being asked to do it, and open to whatever the opportunity is. I feel like that has proven to be valuable for me, is being open to requests to help with a project, or to take on something that I'm like, this seems, why are they asking me? And this is not really what I want to do, but being open to it, and then, giving it 100%. And out of that, I have found that that's where I've been able to show up differently for people, present myself, not just as a physical therapist, but as a solid healthcare leader, and be seen differently within the organization. And for me, that's been extremely valuable.
Thank you so much, Hilary, for sharing just about your journey and, just about your perspective. Is there any way that our listeners can get in contact with you, whether it be social media or just kind of learn more about you via the websites or anything like that?
Yeah, so they can reach out to me on LinkedIn for sure, and, be happy to connect with individuals.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hilary.
All right, thanks, guys.